In 2018, Apple became the first ever trillion-dollar company. This is no small feat, considering the company nearly went bankrupt in the early 1990s. So it's clear to see that the company that kind of has their humble beginnings in the global empire they are today is an inspirational story and journey that they've had. But is it necessarily ethical? It's become pretty well known that the founder of Apple, Steve Jobs, his business practices were some have deemed not ethical. But that's been years ago. How's the company today? It still seems that the company is still dealing with the unethical practices that they're admitting to at this point. In the same year that Apple became a trillion-dollar company, they later were accused and later admitted to purposely slowing down older Apple devices. But does Apple have some legitimate reasons as to why they slow down Apple devices? And are they the only company to do so? Also, where do service providers fall into this mix as well? Let's find out. So, as the Independent reports, Apple does have some pretty legitimate reasons as to why they slow down Apple devices. It's just whether consumers are actually buying it or not. So, as Apple claims, the reason they slow down older Apple devices is to help with the battery life of the phone over time. Because, like any form of technology, the battery degrades over time. And to be able to keep up with the newer software issues or updates, the battery and the performance has to be slowed down to help the battery extend. So Apple claims they're actually doing this to help consumers and help the device's longevity. Of course, many consumers were kind of outraged about this, that not only because of the lack of transparency that Apple just didn't let them know about this, but also not even giving them the option of whether they want this on or off. Apple has tried to combat this with a few different ways. One way is offering a $29 battery replacement for older devices, because this would help not only the battery life, but performance, since that issue wouldn't be present anymore. Global news reports, though, that in iOS 12, there has been some speed improvements, and now that battery saving feature can be turned off. In iOS 12, older devices such as an iPhone 6 or 6S have seen major performance increases that makes them similar to iPhone like 7 or maybe even an 8. It's very drastic. Also, like I previously stated, the battery issue or setting can now just be turned off. So now customers can choose whether they want to use that setting. So it seemed that Apple's kind of playing catch up and they're trying to kind of backtrack and fix these issues. So it would seem that maybe they're in good graces with their consumers again, but the same can't be said with Apple and the US government. In the same year Apple admitted to this, the US government started an investigation on them, The Verge reports, to see if their actions were a security risk or if there was any type of breach made. There's been no resolution yet specifically in the United States, but there has been a resolution and a verdict in Italy. Apple was charged that and deemed that their actions were a security issue and that their actions were unethical. Because of this, they had to pay over $11 million in charges. However, Apple isn't the only company that's had to do this. Its biggest rival, arguably, Samsung, was hit with the exact same charge in Italy as well. The biggest difference between them is that Apple basically, once they were found out, they admitted to like, hey, yeah, we purposely are slowing down devices, while Samsung has still kind of stuck by their original statement that they don't purposely slow down devices and that they've never done that and that they value their consumers. Nevertheless, they were still charged and they had to pay a fine as well. It just kind of further shows that Samsung's doing something and Apple is as well, and their business practices are very different in this regard, if Samsung is telling the truth or if they're not. Other cell phone manufacturers that are kind of been in the news lately, specifically for some type of unethical security, privacy, free speech issue, would be Huawei and ZTE. The CNET and The Verge reports that Huawei and ZTE phones have been under investigation because they've possibly been used to spy on the US government. This has gotten so serious that the President of the United States, Donald Trump, has stated that Huawei and ZTE phones can't be used by government officials because of the possible security issues that they brought. This has gotten so serious that cell phone providers have stated that they kind of want to distance themselves from ZTE and Huawei, with them not really even offering their phones anymore. So now to get a ZTE or Huawei phone in the United States, it's a little more difficult, and you might have to go through a third-party carrier or a merchant like Amazon to get that, and that's even if the cell phone provider still offers the service to those devices. Speaking of cell phone providers, they also had been in the news, not just recently, but like for many years now, for their ethical, or in this case unethical, business practices and integrity issues, specifically for their consumers and in the form of technology. The first one is AT&T, which the Federal Trade Commission reports that AT&T was charged over $100 million because of unapproved transactions that appeared on customers' accounts, such as like accessories or phone insurance that customers did not approve were still getting charged for. There was charges such as like taxes or new fees that their consumers weren't being made aware about, that many customers were kind of outraged about. Also, kind of in the more recent news, T-Mobile was charged over $40 million for misleading customers with a few different situations. Engadget reports this. Specifically with T-Mobile, they've over the years has had to deal with unauthorized charges. Customers have complained about this, and such as accessories or phone insurance. And in more recently, throttling issues, customers were told that they were allowed so many megabytes or gigabytes of internet a month and that it wouldn't slow down, but this wasn't the case, that it did in fact slow down afterwards. It's just business practices like this that show that technology is not just unethical with the phone manufacturers, but also the service providers. The technology and the security issues, the integrity issues, or privacy issues can kind of fall all in between these. So in conclusion, ethics is such a big deal, especially in the technology field. Just like I previously stated, because there's so many security or privacy or free speech issues that it can fall into so many of these categories. It's really hard to determine, is this ethical, is this not? And this is kind of a prime example with Apple. Many people are kind of so easy to say that Apple, they're definitely unethical, their business practices, and that they're slowing down older devices, and that this is wrong. Even though Apple has come out and stated, like I previously stated, the reasons for why they slow down devices, like the battery issues and that it's degrading, and it is to help devices over time. But it's kind of a contradiction, because when they released iOS 12, it speeds up older devices, which kind of defeats the purpose that they stated that it has to slow down devices for the battery issues, when in a software update, you can actually increase the speed of the device. It just doesn't add up. Also with companies like Samsung, they've also dealt with this issue, but instead of what Apple just admitting to it and kind of spinning it in their own way, Samsung is more on the approach that we would never do that, and that this is not something that Samsung condones. Either way, both of them were charged with these issues, and a resolution still hasn't been made specifically for the United States. When it comes to other service providers or manufacturers, it comes to like ZTE and Huawei as well. When it comes to these security issues and privacy, with it's being told that their devices are being used to spy on the US government. So the government officials have had to take action with this, and like I previously stated, they can't be used by government officials anymore. And the cell phone service providers are kind of distancing themselves from these companies, which is kind of understandable. Speaking of the service providers, they also as well as had to deal with unethical charges and integrity issues, with consumers reporting issues with unauthorized charges on their account, or being told one thing and something else happens. It's just with all this news, it really just we're kind of at a turning point. It's good to see if what Apple has done with admitting that it purposely slows down older devices. It's going to be interesting to see if other companies follow suit, and see if there's going to be more of a transparency now, or if companies are going to be more like Samsung and stick to their guns and state that, no, this is not what we do, this is some other issue. It really is interesting to see where this is going to go, and only time will tell to see how this is going to end.